They said the basement was just storage, a forgotten place beneath the old St. Vincent's Hospital, locked and sealed since 1980. For decades, rumors spread among nurses and staff. Some swore they heard noises under the floor at night. Others said the air vents carried faint whispers. But no one went down there. No one dared. Then, in 2024, during a major renovation, a construction team was ordered to break open the heavy rusted doors. Workers joked nervously as sparks flew from their saws, but the laughter faded the moment the final lock gave way. The air that escaped was stale, heavy, like it hadn't been breathed in for 40 years. Some of the men coughed. One stumbled back, swearing he'd heard something move inside. Among the crew was Daniel Reyes, the site supervisor. Practical, tough, not the kind of man to scare easily. Yet when he shined his flashlight into the basement stairwell, the beams seemed to be swallowed by shadows. The concrete walls dripped with moisture, and the smell, it wasn't just dust. It was something metallic, something rotten. Step by step, Daniel led his team down the creaking stairs. The silence pressed on them like a weight. No wind, no insects, nothing living, just a strange hum beneath their feet, as if the building itself remembered something it wanted to forget. And then, halfway down, they found the first sign, an old gurney tipped on its side, its straps still buckled tight, as if someone or something had been restrained there. Questions raced through Daniel's mind. Why had this place been sealed off so suddenly in 1980? What had the hospital hidden from the world for more than 4 decades? And why, even now, did it feel like they weren't supposed to be there? At the bottom of the stairs, the beam of the flashlight swept across the room and froze. Daniel's voice caught in his throat. The workers behind him gasped, because in the far corner of the basement, something moved. Daniel's hand trembled as he tightened his grip on the flashlight. The beam quivered across the basement wall, chasing shadows that seemed too quick to be tricks of the light. Behind him, the workers whispered among themselves, their nervous voices bouncing off the damp concrete. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but they all felt the same thing, that they weren't alone down there. The basement wasn't just a room. It was sprawling, divided by half-collapsed partitions and narrow corridors that disappeared into blackness. Pipes overhead dripped steadily, and every sound echoed unnaturally long, as though the space itself amplified fear. Daniel forced himself to move forward. He had a reputation as the steady one, the kind of supervisor who kept crews calm during cave-ins or blackouts. But this was different. This wasn't a natural danger. This was something hidden, something deliberate. The hospital's history flickered in his mind. St. Vincent's had closed its psychiatric wing in 1980, the very same year the basement was sealed. Locals told stories about experimental treatments, patients who disappeared, and a scandal hushed up before it reached the newspapers. His mother, once a nurse here, had whispered warnings to him as a boy. "Don't go near the old hospital, Danny." Some doors were shut for a reason. Now that warning echoed louder than ever. He brushed dust from a rusted sign bolted to the wall. The faded letters read "Restricted Ward. Authorized personnel only." A chill traveled down his spine. This wasn't storage. It had never been storage. The crew's electrician, a younger man named Omar, broke the silence. "Boss, do you hear that?" Everyone froze. Beneath the dripping water and the hum of the pipes, there was another sound. Faint, rhythmic, like breathing. Daniel's flashlight swept toward the far corner again, where the movement had come from. For a second, the light caught something metallic, a row of old hospital lockers. Their doors were dented and rusted shut, yet one of them rattled softly, as if something inside was pressing outward. No one spoke. The air felt thicker, heavier, as though stepping closer might suffocate them. And then, with a sharp clang, the locker door shifted on its own. The workers stumbled back. One cursed under his breath. Daniel felt his pulse hammering in his ears, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, each footfall echoing louder than the last. Because if the hospital had sealed this basement to bury its secrets, then those secrets were now awake. Daniel's breath came slow and deliberate as he stood before the rattling locker. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to lead his crew up the stairs and reseal the doors as if they had never opened them. But another part of him, the part that had built a career on not showing fear, pushed him forward. His men were watching, and he knew if he faltered, they would scatter. Omar's voice cracked behind him. "Boss, whatever's in there, it doesn't belong to us. We should leave it shut." Daniel turned, his jaw tight. "We were sent here to clear this place. If we walk away, someone else will just be sent in. Better it's us." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. What if Omar was right? What if this wasn't something that should ever be disturbed? Before he could decide, another worker, Luis, whispered, "There's more." He was pointing to the opposite wall. In the dust, smeared faintly across the cracked tiles, were handprints. Dozens of them. Small, large, some streaked downward as though clawing for escape. The prints trailed toward a sealed metal door set into the wall. Unlike the locker, this door was chained shut with multiple heavy locks. Far too many for simple storage. The realization struck Daniel hard. The hospital hadn't sealed the basement to keep people out. It had been sealed to keep something in. His flashlight wavered, and for the first time, he felt a real crack in his composure. He remembered his mother again, her trembling hands, the way she refused to talk about her years at St. Vincent's. Had she known? Had she seen this with her own eyes? The men began to argue in hushed tones. Omar wanted to leave immediately, to pretend nothing had been found. Luis, pale but stubborn, wanted to see what lay behind the chained door, insisting they couldn't just ignore evidence of something this dark. Daniel stood between them, torn. His duty said one thing, his gut said another. And all the while, the locker rattled again, louder this time, a metallic groan that sent shivers down every spine. Then, as if to mock their fear, the power surged. The emergency lights flickered to life for the first time in decades, casting the basement in a sickly yellow glow. For a split second, Daniel saw the entire room, rows of overturned gurneys, broken wheelchairs, and in the shadows beyond the chains, shapes. Dozens of shapes, too still to be alive, yet too unnatural to be debris. The lights blinked off, plunging them back into darkness. Someone let out a strangled gasp. Daniel knew they had crossed a threshold. This was no longer just a renovation project. Whatever secrets had been buried here were waking up, and they were not meant to be uncovered. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the hollow basement. The rattling locker had fallen silent, but the sense of something watching didn't fade. Every shadow seemed to twitch with life. Every drip of water sounded like a footstep just out of sight. Luis stepped forward, voice trembling. "We can't just leave it like this. What if someone, needs help?" Omar's glare was sharp. "Help? Those aren't people, Luis. That's something else." The argument died in the stale air as the sound began again. A soft, dragging scrape from beyond the chained door. Daniel froze, flashlight sweeping the wall, catching the faint glint of metal through the gaps. The locks were old but not immovable. Whoever, or whatever, was inside seemed aware they were being watched. Daniel swallowed hard. Memories of hospital staff disappearing in the 70s flickered in his mind. Stories whispered about patients who were experimented on and then never mentioned again. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized this wasn't just history. They had stumbled onto the epicenter of it. Then came a sound that made blood run cold. A whisper, low, almost human, almost pleading. But it carried something else, something dark, insistent, urgent. "Don't open." Daniel blinked. "Did you hear that?" The men nodded, pale and frozen. The basement seemed to close in on them. Every echo bounced in unpredictable patterns. Every shadow stretched unnaturally long. They were no longer just workers in a sealed-off basement. They were trespassers in a place meant to stay forgotten. Daniel's flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he saw a glimpse of movement behind the chained door. A hand? A figure crouched low? Impossible. There shouldn't be anything living here. Not after 44 years. Omar backed toward the stairs. "I'm done. We're done." Luis clenched his fists. "No." We need to know what's inside. This is bigger than us. Daniel felt the pressure of their gazes. He knew he had to decide. His hands itched toward the chains. One tug, just one, and everything would change. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, almost demanding attention. And then, above the low hum of the building settling, came another sound, a clatter from the far corner of the basement. Something heavy hit the concrete floor. Something that had been hidden, but now was moving. A cold gust of air surged up the stairs, carrying with it a scent Daniel couldn't name. Rotten, metallic, and alive. The locker shuddered violently. A shadow emerged just beyond the beam of his flashlight. Long, thin, and impossibly fast. Daniel froze. The room held its breath. The secrets of the hospital were waiting, just out of reach. And in that moment, he realized there was no turning back. Whatever had been sealed in the basement, it was awake. Daniel's pulse raced as the shadow in the corner seemed to stretch and twist, moving against the angle of the flashlight. The locker rattled again, sharper this time, and a chill washed over the room. His crew's nerves were fraying, and he could feel the tension radiating from them like electricity. Then, the unexpected happened. A low, metallic voice, not human, not quite, cut through the darkness. Daniel. His blood ran cold. How did it know his name? He whipped the flashlight toward the source, but the beam caught nothing. Omar stumbled backward, knocking over a rusted gurney. Dust filled the air. Luis swore he saw movement near the chain door, but before he could point, the door creaked slightly, as though responding to their fear. And then the betrayal. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from someone he trusted, his own mother. "Get out. They're watching. Don't open the door." The words hit him like a blow. His mother, the one person he thought was guiding him with warnings, had been silently watching, or worse, manipulating him. Why? And who were they? His mind spun with questions. While he hesitated, Omar shoved him aside. "I'm done, man. You want to play hero? Go ahead. I'm leaving." He bolted up the stairs, disappearing into the faint light above. Luis turned to Daniel, eyes wide pale. "If we don't see this through, we'll never know what really happened here. We have to open it." And then it happened. The chain door trembled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air pressure seemed to shift. A sharp clanging echoed from within, followed by a whispering cacophony, as though dozens of voices were speaking at once. Something large moved just behind the metal. Something alive. Daniel hesitated. One tug on the chains, one wrong move, and he might unleash whatever the hospital had locked away. His fingers brushed the metal. His mother's warning echoed, but so did the pull of curiosity, of duty, of discovery. Then another surprise. Through the flickering light, he noticed papers scattered across the basement floor, medical files yellowed with age. As he bent to pick one up, the writing sent his stomach twisting, patient names, treatment notes, and at the bottom of each, initials he recognized. His mother's. She had been part of whatever had happened here, part of the secret the hospital had tried to bury. Daniel froze. Betrayal, history, and danger collided. The basement was no longer just a sealed room. It was a trap, a confession, and a warning, all rolled into one. And now, standing at the edge of the truth, he realized nothing here would ever be the same. Daniel's fingers curled around the chains, heart hammering, sweat stinging his eyes. The whispers behind the door had grown into a chorus, urgent, pleading, angry, every voice overlapping, every tone a warning. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Decades of secrecy, fear, and manipulation all leading to this moment. Taking a deep breath, he pulled. Metal screeched, chains groaning under the strain. The door shifted, inch by inch, until finally it swung open just enough for a narrow gap. A blast of cold air surged out, carrying the faint scent of iron and decay. Beyond the gap, the basement opened into a larger, hidden chamber, a room frozen in time. Rusted gurneys, broken medical equipment, and dozens of patient beds lined the walls. Dust-covered charts revealed horrific experiments, unapproved treatments, chemical trials, patients restrained against their will. And in the center, crouched in shadow, were forms, human-shaped but unnervingly still, almost spectral. Daniel swallowed hard. He had expected horrors, yes, but not this. Not the undeniable proof that the hospital had buried lives, some of them still, somehow, lingering. Louise stepped closer, trembling, and pointed to the files scattered across the floor. Your mother, she knew. She'll help hide this. Daniel felt a stab of betrayal, but also understanding. Fear and loyalty had driven her choices decades ago. He realized the true moral dilemma. Uncover the truth fully and expose decades of corruption, or leave the past buried and protect what little humanity remained. A sudden movement made them both flinch. One of the forms shifted, barely perceptible, a faint moan escaping lips cracked with age. The ghostly residue of lives forgotten. Daniel realized the truth. The hospital hadn't just sealed the basement. It had tried to erase guilt, to hide its sins from the world. He stepped back, breathing hard. We can't let this go on. This story needs to be told, he whispered, his voice steady despite the terror. We'll document everything. Names, dates, everything. Then, as if reacting to his words, the shadows receded slightly. The forms didn't move aggressively. They seemed almost relieved, finally acknowledged. The chains rattled one last time and fell limp to the floor. Daniel's mother's warnings echoed, but now in context. Fear had protected secrets, but truth would set them free. Daniel and Louise worked quickly, photographing, cataloging, and recording everything. They felt the weight of history on their shoulders. Yet for the first time in the basement, there was clarity. Just as they prepared to leave, Daniel noticed a small, leather-bound journal tucked beneath a gurney. Opening it, he froze. The handwriting wasn't his mother's. It was his own, dated 20 years ago, long before he ever worked at the hospital. Memories he didn't recognize flooded back. A recurring dream he had as a child of the basement, of whispers calling his name. The basement had been waiting for him all along, not just to uncover the truth, but to remember it. The basement was quiet now, the air still but heavy with the weight of the secrets it had held for decades. Daniel stepped carefully over the scattered files and dust-covered equipment, feeling an unusual mix of exhaustion and relief. The forms in the shadows no longer seemed threatening. In a strange way, acknowledging them had set them free. Luis glanced around, eyes wide but calmer. "It's over," he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel shook his head, a small, sad smile forming. "Not really. The hospital may have tried to erase the past, but we can't. These stories, these people, they need to be remembered. That's our responsibility now." For Daniel, the basement had become more than a place of fear. It had become a mirror reflecting human choices, the mistakes, the betrayals, the fear that keeps people silent. His mother's warnings, once confusing, now made sense. She had tried to protect him from the weight of history, but she had also been part of it. Understanding her role didn't make him angry. It made him human. As they carried the files toward the stairwell, Daniel paused. He turned to glance back at the darkened room one last time. The shadows seemed almost peaceful now, as if acknowledging that their truth had finally been recognized. He thought about all the lives touched, the hidden stories, and the secrets the hospital had buried. The basement would always remain a place of mystery, but now it had a voice. Luis nudged him, pointing to the leather-bound journal Daniel had found. "You really were connected to all this, weren't you?" Daniel nodded. "I guess some things find us whether we're ready or not. What matters is what we do with them." As they emerged into the sunlight above, the hospital loomed silently, its walls bearing scars of time and secrecy. Daniel felt a mix of sorrow and hope. They had faced the truth, confronted it, and now it could no longer hide. The story would be told, and the lives lost would not be forgotten. He took a deep breath and spoke aloud, partly to himself, partly to the world. History isn't just dates and names. It's choices. And if we have the courage to uncover it, we can learn, we can remember, and maybe we can do better. Luis smiled faintly, and together they walked away from the hospital, leaving the basement behind but carrying its lessons forward. For Daniel, this was more than a story. It was a reminder that even in darkness, facing the truth is the only way to honor what came before. And somewhere, deep in the old hospital walls, the whispers softened. Not forgotten, not ignored, finally acknowledged.